Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. I hope everybody's day is going absolutely beautiful. We are streaming to you today from the Bay Area, the first podcast of the True Life Podcast in California. So I'm excited to have an incredible guest, which most of my listeners know, and that is Reverend Dr. Jessica Rochester. She's the Madrina and president of the Sceaux de Montréal, a Santo Daime Ayahuasca church that she founded in 1997 in Montreal, Canada. She's a transpersonal counselor. She trained in the work of Dr. Roberto Assagioli and trained with Dr. Stanislav Grof. She worked with Health Canada from 2000 until 2017 to achieve a Section 56 exemption to import and serve the Santo Daime Sacrament. She's an ordained interfaith minister with a doctorate in divinity. From 1986 to 2018, she has been a workshop leader, teacher, and in private practice. She's the author of Ayahuasca Awakening, a guide to self-discovery, self-mastery, and self-care, volumes 1 and 2. She continues to lecture on consciousness, non-ordinary states of consciousness, self-discovery, spiritual development, health and well-being, and personal transformation. Dr. Jessica, thank you for being here today. How are you?
Well, thank you so much for inviting me back on the show. I'm really honored to be your first guest in your new studio and launching a new season. So the first thing I'm going to do is send you life, health, happiness, and open paths. Okay, health in the body, peace in the spirit, and love in the heart. It is this that I wish for you, all our brothers and sisters, all creatures, and all humanity.
Well, thank you. I can feel the love surrounding me, and there's a sort of electric newness that happens when you're in a new area, and I feel like moving to an area sort of opens up and makes you more aware. It's its own new awareness, and I think that's a nice segue into what we're going to talk about today.
Well, it actually is, and I do want to confirm what you've said. Those of you who are interested, if you haven't read my books, you'll find that in volume 2, when we talk about the circle of wholeness, we talk about how where we live, and we touch on it in the self in volume 1, part 1, but we talk about how where we are, sacred sites and geography affects us. And whether we're in the mountains or in the desert or next to the ocean or the cachoeiras, the little rivers and streams, that there's a connection that we have with nature. And when we change our geography, they talk to people and they go and live in the mountains or in the forests, and so you've made this switch, and you're going to find that the trees will talk to you if you listen. The earth, everything has a vibration. And this is not just la talk. This is science. The insects are all talking to each other. It's just in a decibel that is beyond our range. Elephants often, they have a call they can do well below our range. The tectonic, plates are shifting and grinding. Can you imagine if we could hear all of this? It would be overwhelming. So
Right.
Each body that we have, whether we're a bird, a dolphin, an elephant, or a human, is a filtering mechanism that filters out everything that isn't essential for our survival. And that's just how we're wired. So we see, smell, hear, sense a certain range of things. And then every other creature does so a bit differently. But if we pay attention, we'll find that there is a vibration, exactly what you're saying. And there's a vibration, a new place and a new energy. And is it the land and the rocks and the rivers and, the trees talking to you? Is it the people and the culture around? And we can say yes to it's all of it.
Yeah.
Everything has its place.
The wonderful language of relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're making a new relationship, and you can do the indigenous, all my relationships, and out of the rocks and the trees, or you can do the Buddhist, which is we are brothers and sisters in everything, or you can do the Namaste, what feels right for you. But we'll find that all ancient cultures have this deep understanding of our connectedness to nature and to our surroundings, and how to really experience that in the best way that we can for our higher good, and for nature's higher good. So all good vibrations for your new chapter. And we have an interesting
We do.
topic. And it's such an interesting one to start your new season in. So, I flew it by you last month or so, 2 months ago. Hey, do you want to talk about this? And you said, yeah, sure. So we're talking about projection, transference, and countertransference. And then specifically in the non-ordinary state of consciousness, because that's an important thing to be talking about and needs to be revisited every now and again, because these things kind of sip down into our unconscious, because you can feel vulnerable talking about these things. Right. So let's start with some definitions. You know me, I always like to define things. These are listeners, are scrambling for dictionaries. What's that? Okay. Or some strange idea about what these words actually mean. So to start with, we got to roll back to Freud and Jung, because they battled out the definitions of this. They were colleagues who discussed these things and wrote about these things and corresponded with each other about what these things meant and how they saw the placement of them in the theories they were developing and in the reality of living with their practices and their clients and patients, and what they were discovering through their own awareness. Now we can say, okay, their maps were a little limited, especially the Freudian one. Okay, a little focused in one area, but everything has value. Okay, we just have to put the other pieces in to balance it out. So what is projection? What would be your definition?
Projection seems to me, in my experience, to be a defense mechanism, often unconscious, that if I say this person is being really hostile, maybe it's because I'm being really hostile. It's sort of this mirror image that we put on people. And if we pay attention to it, at least in my experience, you can see yourself and other people through this sort of unconscious projection, your thoughts onto them.
Yes, that's already speaking to an awareness of the mechanism. So let's dial it back down to there's a few definitions of projection, each one adding on. Okay, so the classical definition is what happens when we repress or reject on an internal level because it has been repressed or rejected by family, education system, society, culture, an era. Okay, we repress certain aspects of ourselves that is unacceptable in our environment. Okay. And then once it's repressed, and it's usually going into our unconscious, okay, if we see it out there, we might have a strong reaction to it. Okay. Because we've had to repress it in us. So if we went to school in a convent school, okay, where we had to obey the nuns and and live in a very strict system, then it's only natural that certain movements might be attributed to acting in a certain way that was unacceptable. That sexuality, sensuality, even creativity, curiosity. Okay, many things can get packed down because of external situations and environments. And so if we see it in someone else, that will awaken a response, and we may feel the need to reject or repress it in the person that we see it in, or the situation that we see it in. Or we might feel envious of it without realizing that it's inside of us, jealous or envious. Okay, and have a kind of, I've worked with many people who have that whole thing going on for them, that they got so contained that they didn't realize that what they saw in others that they envied was a lot of it was inside of themselves. And if they just turn their focus back on me and find what's in me and develop that, then they don't have eyes looking on other people. So those are some of the common things that can be happening in kind of classical projection. And those of you who have my books, you know that I cover it in volume 1. In a broader sense, it's the unconscious denial of an aspect of our reality, our internal reality. Okay, so it's a combination possibly of the things that we've seen It may have been an actual imposition because of society or culture that we have to dress a certain way. We have to, and this is affected, you know, it's affected, it seems to have affected women more than men, because certain aspects in culture and society have always been more restrictive where it comes to women than men. You know, men could travel by themselves, women couldn't for centuries, if not millennia, you know. Men could publish, women had to publish in their husband's, father's, or brother's name, or do art. You know, how many great books and great works of art and literature are actually done by women, got attributed to their husbands, brothers, or fathers, you know? When you think about it, women's clothing always more repressive than men's. You know, men could go to university, women couldn't go to university. So those things have always been somewhat more tight when it's come to women. But no one should think that men got off scot-free. Okay, because there's some aspect, just want to say a word about that. There's an aspect in kind of, let's call it the feminist movement, and I am all in supporting for women to be empowered and strong and take their place and equal opportunity on absolutely every single solitary level. But men didn't get off scot-free and get it all. They had to disown parts of themselves. They had to always be strong. They always had to be brave. They have to go off and fight the wars. I mean, okay, more recently, women are allowed to do that should they wish, okay? And there was always those queens, you know, who would, Eleanor, Aquitaine, and Boudica, who would get on the horse and take a sword and go and fight, but they were very rare. The average woman was not allowed to do that, you know? If you were a queen, you could get away with a little bit more stuff than the average woman. You know, put your apron back on, sweetheart, and go in the kitchen, you know? So the men also had to, you know, stuff down stuff. And only more recently are men allowed to take ownership and of trauma or loss, or you didn't have to come back from every war saying, me hero, me strong. Okay? You could come back saying, horrified at what I had to do and what I saw. And our culture now has made space for men to have that. Okay? And so many things can get disowned, hidden, and then they can move into that area of projection. So I just want to read one thing that I wrote here, how deep it can go. It can go into thoughts, feelings, belief systems. Okay? It's as if what we disown can have its own life. It's only its own body sensation. Does this make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Often it does take on its own life. And that's when you say, I don't know who I am.
Yeah. When it gets activated, there can be a lot of sensations, thoughts, feelings, beliefs, body feelings, even a body posture that accompanies that which has been disowned, repressed, or denied. Okay? It's the mechanism or imagining also that other people have those same experiences. Okay? And that's an interesting form of projection. The thief thinks everyone is stealing. Right?
Yeah.
So that's a different aspect of projection now. The person who is unfaithful assumes that everyone cheats on their partner. Okay? This is all projection. That what I'm doing, thinking, feeling, everyone's doing, thinking, and feeling. It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about the role of the collective unconscious in that.
Say more.
Well, it seems to me that when you get to a certain age, or maybe you've had a certain set of experiences, you come to this realization that just because you think something, or just because you think something, doesn't mean anybody else in the world may be thinking it. They may, but that particular situation has gotten me into some sticky situations, and and so that's why I say
your
about the role.
name is, you know, a legion. Okay, there's so many people because this is what happened: is the unconscious trips us up.
Right. Yes.
We know it. We've stepped into a pile of doo-doo,
Right.
and everything is kind of stinky now. You know.
Yeah.
And how do we get past that? You know. So let's talk about another aspect
Okay.
of projection, which is really interesting in our current, and where our culture is right now on Western civilization and what's going on. Okay, so another form is holding people responsible for what we feel inside. You made me feel like that. This is particularly specific for people who carry shame or feelings of inadequacy. Okay, instead of saying, oh, something about this situation that, or this person is awakening this that is inside of me, they blame the other person. You make me feel like this, which is a projection. It's not true. So you may have a friend who's brags and is arrogant about their accomplishments. And instead of you being happy for them and teasing them about their bragging, which would be a healthy response, like, yay, you know, you got that promotion that you were after. And hey, dial down the ego, buddy, you know.
Right.
So instead of having support for the accomplishment and a sense of humor, which is always can ease things, okay, as long as it's a true, kind sense of humor and it's not sarcasm or, you know, covert put down and all those things. Haha, only joking. You know, meanwhile, I'll wipe your blood off my knife and stick it back in my boot. You know. So you made me feel like this is not okay. You know, everyone needs to take a long, hard look in the mirror. If they find themselves doing that, okay, they can come home and say, oh, my boss, you know, or supervisor or manager or whatever, okay, or go out with the girls or the guys or whatever you might do and say, oh, my partner, you know, that makes me feel like this all of the time. You gotta own that's inside. We have to be willing to look in the mirror and say, okay, this is mine. And if I'm feeling inadequate, I need to look inside of myself and think, what is it about this situation or this person that is it that makes me feel inadequate? And what's that about? And what is it that I need to be doing? You know? Does that make sense? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, 100%. I look at experiences in my life and my relationships, and you know, you see it. I see it in growing up, and it's been a big part of my therapy of living the best life I can or having a better relationship, is coming to terms with you can't control the situation, but you and you alone get to control the meaning of that event.
Yes.
And that's ownership of it, right?
Mm-hmm. And that is core in the therapeutic relationship,
Right.
to create the space, a supportive, and even let's call it safe, sacred space,
Right.
in which respect, okay, and healthy boundaries are always there, ethics on the top, okay,
Yeah.
and in which we help people find that place that you just spoke to. You know, we need to get to that place where what's mine and what's not mine, what am I accountable for, and what is I just got to let go of, and what's just part of life, what's just part of being human and living, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, who am I and how do I come to terms with this is what I got in this lifetime. You know, this is the hand of cards or what I got dealt, and now how do I make my journey? This is one lifetime. How do I make my journey? And what meaning do these things have for me? And it gets very interesting. So a projection bias, which is another aspect of projection, which I find particularly interesting, having, you know, practice, and especially in non-ordinary states of consciousness, the decades I was doing Stan Grof's work, the holotropic breath work. And so it is a bias that one's current state of being will last forever, will always last. Okay, let's look at two extremes. Okay, the person who is completely depressed, okay, for whatever reason, could be any reason, a divorce, a career change, a loss of some kind, a health diagnosis, could be any reason for it. Okay, in that depression, they may look at it, instead of saying this is a difficult passage, it's actually a healthy reaction to that grief, that loss. If I work with it, I will travel through it and come out the other side, which is what most of us therapists spend doing, just trying to help people get that. Okay, they will think I'm in it forever. It's always going to be like this. I'm always going to feel this sad, this bad, this frightened, this inadequate, this shameful, what have you. Okay. The flip side of it is fall in love. Oh, my partner is the best. It's wonderful. We're in love. Everything is perfect. Yeah. Wait till the first disagreement, and then you'll see what's really there. Okay, is it love? Was it lust? Is it infatuation? Are you going to create the space for it to become love? Okay, so this is a projection bias where what we're feeling right now feels like it's going to continue. Instead of just seeing it's like sunny days, cloudy days, rainy days, and then it snows. Okay, it's kind of like the weather. Everything comes and goes. We want to grasp onto it. It slips through our fingers. We want to push it away. It sticks to our hands. So anything more you want to ask or say or share about projection?
I think we've presented a nice sort of opening for projection.
Yeah, good. Okay. So now the thing is we have to understand that this is operating all the time.
Right.
We're in it like fish in water. Okay. Like we're in air. Okay. It is something that is always happening. And only when it bumps into something will we become aware that it's happening, that these things are inside of us. But it's ubiquitous. Everybody has it. Everybody's got it. The more we hold it with respect and a little humor and some kindness and some wisdom, the more likely we are to be able to name it, work with it, and integrate, understand, or leave behind. So this affects everything everywhere. Personal relationships is often where it's going to really, if you find yourself going in and the bank teller can set you off, well, something's really close to the surface. Okay. You really need to have a look at something's close to the surface. But it's usually the closer the relationships are, or the more power dynamic structure is. Okay. And so that takes us right into transference. Do you want to do a little definition of your sense of what is transference and then what is countertransference?
Yeah, it seems to me that transference is the idea, if I fight with my wife, I'm fighting with my mother. I'm fighting you know what I mean? Like you're still fighting this last battle. They say the generals fight the last wars. Maybe in the idea of transference, we're fighting the last war that we had.
Very well put. Yes, gold star, George. Gold star. Okay. So yes, that it's our internal story. Now it really focuses on this lifetime in this family of origin, and that has really valuable stuff. But it is broader than that. It can be any of the authority figures in our life. It can be an older sibling. I've worked with people where an older sibling has played a larger role, or even a younger sibling, especially situations where in the family dynamic, there's one of the children has a health disorder or a behavioral disorder or special needs. Okay, that sets up a whole lot of stuff, And so we can also have transference that comes beyond, that comes from past lives. And that, for anybody who has a different map from that, that's fine. Okay. But it just has, I've seen it so many times that at some point I just have to accept it. that this is a possibility. And whatever one chooses to believe about the experience of past lives and reincarnation, you know, to quote Stan Grof, you have to admit that there's something happening there. Okay.
Yeah.
But so many people feel that they've relived or re-experienced something that has great meaning and teaching for them, and that somehow shows them something in this lifetime that echoes some theme or experience in a past life or past lives that can be resolved in this one. And that's kind of as simply as I can put it, you know? So yeah, so transference is what the original word that Freud was using was Übertragen, which is actually translation is an overcoat. And he saw it, it's as if we took the overcoat of somebody and, you know, our mothers, fathers, grandparents, whatever, and put it on somebody else and reacted to them as if they were that original person or dynamic. Now we can have transference not on only people, we can have transference on institutions and of all kind, business, academic, religious. Okay, we can really have, you know, deep, strong feelings and reactions to. We see this a lot. I'll use an example. We see this a lot in the Santo Daime, in our Daime church. We wear a uniform. Why do we wear a uniform? Well, there's a very good reason that Mr. Neo decided a uniform was important. And all I have to do is say, when you go on a boat, does the crew wear a uniform so that you can identify the crew? When you get on an airplane, does the crew wear uniforms so that you can identify who's passenger and who's crew? Can you imagine if everybody, just all the crew got on board and whatever they felt like wearing, leggings and a t-shirt, cargo pants, you know, pullover or something? How would you know who's the pilot, who's the stewardess, who's the cabin crew, who to ask for something to eat or where the bathroom is, or, you know, that you don't feel well, or, you know, whatever. So he saw it like that. He saw it that, you know, and he'd had an army background. He'd been conscripted into the army and had served his years in the army. And so he understood a chain of command, and he understood the necessity of having uniforms and also being able to identify chain of command. If there's an extra stripe on your shoulder or on your cap or something, what that signifies. Okay, and so you know who to salute and whose orders to follow and what that chain of command is. And so that worked its way into two uniforms that we wear in the Santo Daime, a white uniform and a blue uniform. And especially our blue uniform, which is the one we wear most often, which is a very simple white shirt for the men and navy blue pants and a navy blue tie. For the women, it's a short-sleeved white shirt and a navy blue pleated skirt. It's so simple. Okay, and a little navy blue tie. So simple, but you instantly know who's crew. Okay, you instantly know who's on deck and who's visitors and who's participants and what have you. And yet it's astounding how many people come in and react. They react to the uniform because it reminds them of schools that they went to where they had really difficult school experiences. And that's a really big reaction that can happen, you know. And so, you know, they get the Santo Daime is a syncretic Christian path. So it's got Eastern spiritualism, it's got European spiritism, it's got some African influences through his family came from Africa, and it's got some Amazonic shamanism in it. So it's very eclectic. And yes, we do have the cross on the central altar, and it's got two bars on it, not just the one classic, say, Catholic or standard Christian cross on it. So people will react to that if they've had a tough, kind of imposing, impositional, religious Christian background. They'll come in and they'll go, you know. And so these are the things that we can, you know, it can go on institutions and not just individuals. If we only think it's about an individual, then we're going to be missing a lot. really missing along. Okay, countertransference. What's your definition on that one?
It seems to me the countertransference is almost when the individual who is sitting with someone or the recipient transfers like their reaction. Maybe they get offended and all of a sudden now they are no longer listening to what the individual told them, but they are responding to a feeling that hurt them in a past conversation or a past experience. And so the conversation just goes sideways from there because they're no really longer talking to one another. Now they're just talking about past projections or past sort of transgressions. Yeah, just side monologuing.
Blah, 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 my story.
Yeah.
And the other person's going, blah, 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 my story. Okay, and everybody stopped listening a long time ago. Okay, and the hackles are rising, and the horses are growling, and the tails are stiffening or swishing.
Right.
The ears are out, and the whole thing's going on. Right? Okay. Now, interesting about Jung, he considered transference to be a spontaneous, complicated phenomenon with many different features. I agree 100% to that. Okay. He believed it connected to instincts and spirit and is aligned with the process of projection. Yes, you got it. So it's not some simple thing. It's quite complex. So we need to be patient and breathe with it and do our best to try and understand it and, do our best with it, Now, countertransference, and I'm going to give you a funny, haha, but not funny, haha, example, okay? Decades and decades ago, I'm going to say it must have been early 90s, and in my training with Stan Grof, we're in a retreat. I think there's about 60 people in the room, divided in sitters and breathers, of course. There's the facilitators. It was just Stan was leading it. He did do other ones with Jack Cornfield, but this one's just Stan. And often Paul Grof, his brother, who I've made reference before, who is a dear friend, and he would come up just to, if it was close to, the east side of, or he could skip out of work for a while, he would join in, and he would just hang out as a kind of an unofficial facilitator, okay, because he himself is an extremely well-respected psychiatrist in his own field. And it was always a joy to have him hang out. And so the thing happens, okay, it happens, and it's not in the little group that I was responsible for, because facilitators would usually work two in a team, and you'd have a group of people within the larger group. So it would be broken down to about 10 or 12 people, and you're responsible for your little group in the room, right? And then leading the sharing circle afterwards, and then going into the larger circle. So one of the breathers is clearly going through something quite deep, and is demanding that the sitter will sit in a way that they can kick them. Okay, I mean, there's certain things that you can ask for. You can ask someone to hold your hand if you're feeling scared. You can ask me Kleenex, give me some water. Even hold you or hug you in a way that is appropriate. Usually, what you do is put a pillow between you and the person, so that there's still a hug, but it's not like intimate.
Right.
Is what I'm saying, because transference and countertransference are so sensitive in non-ordinary states. So there's ways of supporting people and holding them and reassuring them. Okay, so this person was demanding, and what happened to the sitter was they got in a rage and started kicking this breather. So, I mean, it's funny, not funny. Okay, I mean, it is.
Right.
It's not funny. It's only funny in retrospect. In the moment, it was like shocking. Okay, so immediately the facilitators are over there, and then Paul sits with that breather because he's got the courage to be able. He's not going to get caught up in whatever was happening to this breather. That they had the ability to, and here's where it gets very interesting. The more baggage we have, the more emotional, psychological baggage we have, the more likely that we're going to have projections and transference and countertransference going on for us. Okay, and there's certain things that happen in the non-ordinary state of consciousness in which everybody in contact with the non-ordinary state, okay, even if you're the sitter, you're the facilitator, you're not the breather, okay, then, and I'm going to use breathwork as a model, and then perhaps our church, is when you're in the non-ordinary state, everybody is affected. The energy is different. We opened today's, talk with talking about energy and how it's different where you are now. Be in a room where people are in a non-ordinary state of consciousness, deliberately having chosen to enter into a non-ordinary state, the energy is affecting everybody in the room. And when people go into deep passages or difficult material comes up, it's going to affect everyone, okay? Because it's now kind of in the space. So if somebody goes through a deep grieving process or a deep rage process or a deep terrified process, it's going to reverberate in the whole room. And the deeper the non-ordinary state it is, the more expanded it is. Okay, so the difference between facilitators and sitters in a breathwork workshop and congregation in a Santo Daime ritual is everybody in the room is going to feel and have some kind of connection with the person in the passage. Okay, so how it gets managed in one session is different from how it gets managed, obviously, in the other. But it's equally interesting to see how deep the countertransference can be. So the countertransference is, pretty much what you said about when something inside a person reacts to the transference and or projections of the other person. And instead of saying, hey, you seem really upset, do you want to take a little time and maybe we can talk about this later? Or, hey, wait a minute, I don't think this is really about me.
Yeah.
Maybe you're worried or concerned or angry about something else. Can you take a breath? And, so the person's ability to not slide into that countertransference and start reacting to, and these are deep unconscious things. We can be halfway into it before we're going, wait a minute. And this is a marker of our evolution, is how quickly we catch ourselves. How quickly we catch ourselves. Do we only see it afterwards? Do we see it part way in? Oh, wait a minute. I'm in that same old story again. I'm now reacting. My voice is going up. I'm angry. I'm feeling defensive, whatever it is. Or I'm feeling needy and afraid that the person's going to be angry with me, another classic response. Or I'm frightened of them and I need to please them, another classic response, right? I need to protect myself and defend myself and come back 3 times stronger than what they're giving me. Okay, these are all classic examples of countertransference to somebody who's reacting in a projection or a transference towards us. Does that make sense, everything I'm saying? Yes?
Yeah, it's, I think it speaks to the idea of the difference between complicated and complexity. Because when you start looking at it from a realistic lens, you realize that not only are you not the person you think you are, but everybody who sees you as a different person. So you're like 1,000 different people constantly. It's you got to just take a moment and breathe it in. And especially when we start talking about non-ordinary states of consciousness, like we're on a whole nother realm of possibilities. And all of a sudden I start thinking about the maps and the Lycos, or the people enabling people or people taking advantage of people. It's a really complex situation.
Yes. Now, almost without exception, people underestimate the power of the non-ordinary state of consciousness. It's as simple as that, and even people who are working in it all the time, it's easy to forget how sensitive you are, how sensitive others are. This is why, again, I'm using these 2 examples because they're the ones I'm familiar with and I feel have an area of expertise in. Stan Grof's work, there's really clear rules. There's about people who are sitting, and then the facilitators about what their role is, what they are doing and what they're not doing, okay? And how they're supporting and how they're stepping away, and how to manage certain situations, and what to do. And it's the same in our center. We have rules of the Salah, and they're really clear. They're posted on the wall. We read them at the opening of a hymn practice even.
Right.
Because people forget them. They get into the non-ordinary state and all the rules go out the window. The same way you can get on a plane and somebody has a few drinks, and the next thing you know, they won't wear their seatbelt and they want to change their seat, and they want to order something off the menu, and they want to argue with the person in front of them and the kid that's kicking their chair behind them, and before you know it, there's a whole hullabaloo, right? And we have to remember that alcohol, cannabis, even all these legal things, these are legal in Canada, they create a non-ordinary state of consciousness. And so we need to be mindful if we are with people who are taking alcohol and using cannabis. We need to be aware that they're in a non-ordinary state of consciousness. And we have to decide how deeply we want to become engaged in that. That's just a personal choice. Now, different would be a setting, such as the therapeutic setting of the holotropic breathwork setting, Grof's work, or the spiritual/religious setting of our center, the Santo Daime religion, spiritual tradition, and our particular center, where there's rules of the Salah. There's no talking. There's follow the chain of command, the instructions, of no talking. I mean, we have people getting out of state and they want to skip around the room, and they don't want to stay on their side of the room. The women and men are separated for very good reasons, if you ever want to ask about that. Okay, and they get down in the healing area. They want to touch everything, explore everything. It's like a 2-year-old. Okay, and the guardians of people who are on duty for the people in the healing area sometimes have to work very hard to help them get back into, this is the airplane. You need to sit down and be quiet and put your seatbelt on. Okay, and you're trained in an upright position. And so it's for the safety and well-being of that person and for the well-being of everybody in the Salah. The Salah is the sanctuary. So there's rules. There's rules of the Salah, and they are there for very specific reasons. We have rules of the Salah for mediumship. When people come in and they have some background and some healing. Yes, I am doing that for healing because you know my position. Please don't call yourself a healer. Okay, you can call yourself a Reiki master if that's what you are. You can call yourself a massage therapist if that's what you are. You can call yourself all other kinds of things according to your training and experience, but kind of leave the healing thing out because that's a whole other kind of conversation I think we've had before. Might have to have again in the future. Who knows?
Yep.
So that sensitivity that happens when you have a group that is in a non-ordinary state of consciousness together, it means everyone is going to feel it. We call it the current in the Santo Daime because that's what it feels like. It feels like the connectiveness that exists between all beings. We agree on that, right? That there's an interconnected, this web of life, this something that connects all of us, that we are connected to you and me and the trees outside and the birds and the bees and the creatures in the ocean and everything. But there's something that connects us, this universal force that connects everything, okay? Well, in the non-ordinary state of consciousness, you're infinitely more aware of that. So anything that like throwing the pebble in the pond, everything that makes the ripples, everybody's going to feel it. And that's where we learn firmeza. We learn to be firm, and we learn to hold the light and to be firm and to hold the space. So whoever is in the passage or going through the difficulty gets supported in that to the best of everyone's ability to create, Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting to hear it in the context that you're saying, as someone who has apprenticed and been in this particular environment for such a long time and has such experience. It seems that on some level, modern day science, which is awesome, but they have no way to measure that. And so they just leave that part out. Like, this doesn't matter. Like, even though it could be intoxicating for you, like, we're not going to measure that because we don't know how. Like, so you're not going to get the results, or, you know, there's no way to do it. How do you manage what you can't measure?
There are people actually studying it.
Okay.
And there are people studying it. And there's people, whether they're anthropologists or biologists or psychiatrists or scientists and the neuroscientists are doing a great job of looking at neuroplasticity and altered states of consciousness and how that affects, you know, not just the person experiencing, but the people around. And so you can do a different level of scientific measurements. You can't really measure their blood or their blood pressure or the things they really want to be looking at, you know, something very measurable. You have to use a different yardstick when you're working with non-ordinary states, and a different concept of how you're going to be measuring what's happening there, you know? Right. Okay. Let's move to, you know, where we were starting to head to. Why are we talking about things like projections and transference and countertransference in the non-ordinary states of consciousness? And, you know, we've done some really good definitions, and I want to talk about some very common dynamics that happen to people who are working in the space. So I'm talking about the guides, people who've trained to be a psychedelic guide. I'm talking about the researchers who are sitting with people they've received permission to do research projects. Also the clinicians, the researchers, the guides. You know, this information is for ritual leaders, for everybody who's in the position. Okay, I'm going to talk about two of the biggest things to look for. And on one side, you know, here we are back to the Buddha in the middle way, too tight and too loose. Okay. On the one hand, we have care too much. Okay. Care too much. The urge to rescue, save, the urge to not abandon people, the longing to get the power of healing other people, caring too much. In that, care too much is ignoring the self, caregiver burnout. Focusing so much on fixing, rescuing, saving, healing others that you're not taking care of yourself. You don't have a balance in your life for your own well-being, physical, emotional, creative, spiritual, etc. Is that okay?
Yeah.
That's a problem. It's a problem. And needs to, all ritual leaders, caregivers, clinicians need to look at, do I care too much? Now, there's an appropriate time to invest caring in, especially when you're launching something where you will be putting a lot of time and energy into something to get its roots down, you know, to dig the hole and put that in and water it and fertilize it and until it, you know, gets its roots in and starts to grow. Okay. But cares too much. Would you agree that's an issue in the psychedelic space right now?
Yeah. And I think that so far it does seem to be that the idea of apprenticeship has given way to the idea of certification. Like, you can get a certification without apprenticeship, and it's, you know, it's interesting. And I would say that leads to these ideas of care too much or care too little. There's no experience involved. There's a book which you're reading someone else's ideas of what may happen or what could have happened, but you don't have the authority figure saying you're not allowed to talk right now. You're not allowed to do anything but watch, and you're lucky to get to do that right now. So just do that.
Well, that's a classic kind of training in psychology, medicine, psychiatry, all of those things, you know, is, you know, for me, the example I always use about, you want to be a lifeguard and you want to read a book. Can you imagine only reading a book about water? You know, if you read all the books written on water, okay, and pools, okay, but then how do you be a lifeguard? You actually have to learn how to swim properly. And then on top of learning how to swim properly, you can be a very good swimmer, but still not know how to help somebody in the water, how to do the right thing, you know? So then you have to do your lifeguarding, right? I mean, I learned to swim. I did my Red Cross, whatever, so long ago, who knows, you know? But both my children, you know, it's one of the first things I did when I'm a swimmer. So get them a few months old in the water so they start young. They don't have an opportunity to get scared of it. Okay. And I mean, you have to have a healthy respect for water, you know, and there's a time when fear of it, you know, the waves are 50 feet high is a normal, healthy reaction. Okay. You shouldn't be scared of the water in a pool. And so they did all their swimming lessons up to bronze medallion. And then my daughter decided to get her, like, so she could be a lifeguard at summer camps, and she was. And now my little ones, my granddaughters, they're fabulous little swimmers. They're like motorboats. Okay, you put them in the water and they're boom up. They're fabulous little swimmers. And so it's you learn by doing it. You learn to swim by I learned to scuba dive by, taking the tests and reading the books and writing, because you have a written exam. It's like driving. Can you imagine getting a driver's license without driving a car? You might have a written test. Okay, but no one would think that would be, but you to get your driver's license here in Canada, you do a written test and then you do your driving test, and you actually have to pass both of them. Okay. So you do need to know what a red light, yellow light, green light, who yields on which side at the stop signs, and you know, all of these things that you learn from the book. But then you actually have to manage driving the car in traffic and parking and all those other things. So we can look into everyday life and say, well, yeah, it's normal that there's a learning part of it, and then there's the experiencing part of it. And yet somehow in non-ordinary states, that's kind of sort of being left out in some but not all of what we're seeing in programs being developed. Okay. And it's just a really interesting situation. So on the one side, we have care too much, and all the vulnerabilities, internal vulnerabilities and longings that lead to that. Okay. On the other side, we have care too little. Okay. Now, sometimes at the heart, this can be a self-protective mechanism that comes usually from issues of engulfment. It just does. Okay. The same way caring too much usually comes from issues of neglect or abandonment, insufficient attention to the self that you then learned to not pay attention to yourself and give it to others. Okay. So care too little can usually stem from engulfment as a child in this culture, society, in the schoolyard, feeling that you have to protect yourself and put up a kind of a wall so that you don't let anything in. So caring too little in the non-ordinary state can become a problem, where stuff such as countertransference can come up for you, and the next thing you know, you're kicking the sitter who asked, who was demanding for things. So, you know, you always find a way to accommodate. But even if it's saying, no, we can't do that, but let's try doing that this way. Okay. No, you can't kick your sitter. Okay? We're going to hold these pillows for you. Okay. And you can try kicking those. Or how about if you go on your back and you start stomping your feet on the floor and banging your arms and letting some sound out, you know? So it's finding a way that's supportive to get that energy out without it doing anything on anybody else. Feelings of inadequacy is often underneath caring too little. Care too little because if I open up and try, I won't be adequate. I won't be able to do it. I won't know what to do. So I push it away and I care too little. So these are the two more common the things that I've seen in these situations. Now, the care too little, and I can't tell you if it's a care too little or care too much. It certainly look like a care too much. It looks way too much like a care too little. Is if you look at now Jules Evans, always a shout out to him. His most recent All of you, please do watch the clip of Bill Maher's new rules from last week on the actor, forgotten his first name, Perry, his death from ketamine overdose. And he actually hits the nail right on the head in that clip, okay, and what he has to say about what's happening. And he shares a text that the doctor who was serving him and prescribing him wrote to another doctor, these two doctors who were supposedly prescribing him things. And one of the texts says, "Let's see how much this moron can pay." This is tragic. It is so far beyond disrespectful and unethical that it is criminal. And these men will be charged with criminal acts. The very thing they're supposed to do, which is care for their patients in a healthy, appropriate way, not too much so that they, destroy themselves or be inappropriate with their patients, but not too little, that they disregard their health and their well-being to such a severe extent that they take that position of, it's all for me and what I can get out of the situation, whether it's money or power or some other reward for me. This level of arrogance, is it narcissism? What is it? So these are the two, and they can come from many different things. As I said, it can come from inadequacy as much as it can come from arrogance, caring too little. Not getting involved, no. You see somebody fall on the sidewalk, no, somebody else take care of it. Okay? So it can come from arrogance, it can come from self-centeredness or greediness, and it can come from vulnerability and inadequacy. So we have really important dynamics to look at as we go forward in this kind of current era, of psychedelics and entheogens, is how to find our way ethically and responsibly to ourselves, to the substances that we are working with. I can only speak for myself. The plants that I work with are heritage plants. They are protected by the United Nations. We consider them sacred. They're only used in ritual. They're not ever used in any other way. And looking on the flip side of it, in the psychedelics, we can see that they're genuine, good scientists, researchers, and clinicians who are really trying to find a way that these substances can be used for benefit, for health and well-being. And then there's that whole other thing that's happening that's about power and money and greed and me, the big hero, who's the healer, and that makes many of us really concerned that all of that is going to shut everything down again. I mean, I doubt sincerely that it would shut us down, but that would be a huge tragedy if the selfishness of a few, or the arrogance or the greed of a few, can prevent the benefit for the many.
Yeah, if history is if past relevance behavior is the best predictor of future behavior, then that's probably on the horizon on some level.
Well, fingers crossed. is maybe more patience is required.
Right.
People, I don't know whether some people just don't believe me when I tell them that it took 17 years of working with Health Canada to obtain a Section 56 exemption. And there was many different challenges of many different kinds. It wasn't just obstinance in the corner of, there was challenges with the situations in Brazil, and then the Brazilian government and the interference of the American government, and there was layers and layers. There was the unfortunate and preventable death of an Indigenous elder who was served, I think we talked about that at some point, who was served by an Ecuadorian shaman who hadn't been properly coached on what is okay in our culture and what's not okay. You cannot tell people to stop taking their medications. That's where participant or visitor screening is so essential. Is so essential. And again, back to what Bill Maher had to say, who, no, it's Matthew Perry, right?
Matthew.
Who, knowing Matthew Perry's story, in which he published a book talking about it, about how deeply addicted he'd been to other substances, you know, who would offer him more substances, you know, in such a cavalier, uncaring, selfish way. And so this is where paying attention and understanding all the layers that are necessary for these entheogens and psychedelics to be able to go forward, whether it's in the spiritual, ritual setting, or whether it's in the therapeutic, clinical setting, the research setting. There needs to be an impeccability. There needs to be a standard of care. There needs to be ethics. There needs to be accountability. And I get very, unfortunately and sadly, unpopular by saying there has to be consequences. There has to be consequences. You know, it's really uncomfortable for a lot of people to talk about the problems. If we look down, we can see there's been cover-ups about ethical problems. There's been cover-ups about problems in the research protocols. There's been a lack of full disclosure about some things, right?
Yeah.
Well, you know, that's not going to wash. That's where it's sticking. It's sticking because of those things. If everybody was honest with their research, if they were honest with the problems that they were facing, if they were honest about, oh my God, this happened, and we're now looking at it and we see that we need to do this, this, and this to ensure that that does not happen again, right?
Yeah.
If we see that, we can go, oh, okay, the industry is going to correct itself. But if we see simply cover-ups and more cover-ups and lack of accountability, lack of consequences, until it makes the community or the government enforce consequences because they themselves have not governed themselves correctly. I don't know. What do you think about that? It's a hard topic.
Sometimes I feel like we just don't have the proper tools to thoroughly understand what's happening in these states, and that we're not sure who is being healed. Is it, you know, if you don't have the right training and maybe you're not aware, like let's say for example, in a hypothetical, an individual is sitting with someone who may have had like a traumatic sexual experience and that person just got divorced. Is that person in a state to be helping that person, especially under an altered state of consciousness? I don't know. But
well, yes, they could be if they're aware.
Right.
There's two things in place.
Okay.
If they're aware of their own situation, and if they have ethically the ability to step back and say, am I the right person to be doing this? Or should I be asking a colleague? So if that thing is in place, and the second thing that needs to be in place is colleague support. Being able to say to a colleague, okay, I have this situation. Give me some feedback. What do you think? And then listening to what the colleague has to say, which may be, you know what, honey, step back.
Yeah.
This isn't the right moment for you. You serve for the higher good if you step back. Knowing when to step back, knowing when to hand over. This is essential in ethics.
Yep.
Look at President Biden. Okay, it took a little persuading. I don't know who went in the back door of the White House to sit down and have a chat with him, okay, or who he was on Zoom with, okay. But you know what? He maybe the moment was the right moment. We don't know, but he did the right thing. He knew when his own personal ambitions had to take back seat to what was best for the country. what was best for the country was for him to recognize that his health is frail.
Yeah.
And that he needs to take care of himself and finish out his term and allow someone younger and stronger with all that vim and vigor to go in and fight the good fight for their principles and their platform, right? Too bad the other party was doing the same thing. Oh dear, maybe I shouldn't say that publicly. From up here, up north in Canada, it kind of looks like that might benefit for the higher good of everyone too, you know. But that ability to have the ego death of stepping aside, stepping back, because it's a big ego death. You know, to say, no, I got to step back. Somebody else needs to step forward, or I need to hand this over. That takes courage. That takes dignity. Dignity, courage, integrity. These words seem so slim to find these days because ego and arrogance and self-importance. Let's just put it all under the umbrella of self-importance. Is taking so much space. And so dignity and courage and integrity, those three things are so important right now. And if our community and our government was seeing that, or your government or the governments around, if they're seeing integrity and courage and dignity, then they're probably going to get on board with what we're doing. But if they see arrogance and they see wild claims and they see cover-ups, of course they're not going to trust.
Yep.
Respect and trust are decreased each time we find out that there's been a cover-up, a lack of disclosure of what's important to disclose. Obviously, we don't let everything hang out. I mean, that's, you know, there's a time and place for that. Is it making some sense what I'm saying? That those three qualities are what's essential? I'll share an autobiographical story. You know, in 2010, after like 10 years of having a relationship with the Office of Controlled Substance and a first name basis with the directors and senior staff, and I realized that I reached the end of the road, and most of our board and members had reached the end of the road with our then Brazilian affiliate. There was just, in the beginning, a different culture, different language, not knowing the language, a new thing, and, you know, people hiding things from us and covering things up. But over those first few years, things became obvious and more so, and et cetera, and then try to deal with them and try to bring ethics in and try to set up situations in which stuff can be managed, and kind of none of it worked. And so reached the end of the road where thank you for all the good things, but can no longer accompany. And that's the attitude that I think we all need to have when we come to the end of the road with something, a business situation, a relationship. Thank you for the good things. This is closure. Got to end here. I have the unenviable task of going and sitting in the office with the director of the Office of Controlled Substance and saying, we're closing with our affiliate. I'll be going back to Brazil, find a new affiliate. And so I basically had legal counsel prepare me as if I was going on the stand in front of, you know, judge and jury, because who knows what hung in the balance? Who knows how they were going to take this? But I had no choice. I had to do it, and I had to do it in person. Yeah. So I made my appointment, and I go in, and we do our greetings and everything, and I say, well, I'm here today because, you know, over time, we've become aware of serious ethical challenges, you know, and just we can no longer accompany. We've tried all the things that we can try. Also, there was dependency use of cannabis, and cannabis use, a big problem in that particular branch, which we've always been single sacrament. I am, and single sacrament is what Minister Neo, when he created the Santo Daime, he said, yes, he said about cannabis, yes, this is a power plant. It needs to be respected, but you don't put it in this community. It doesn't belong with the Santo Daime. That is the teaching of Master. You don't mix those plants. Okay? And so we're very clear on that, and I've been very clear with that on the government for the get-go. So I sit there and I feel like I'm basically down to my underwear. Okay, that's how vulnerable I'm feeling. Okay, I have nothing to stand behind except my own personal integrity. and the code of ethics that our board had promised to follow. And I'm thinking, they may take all our application and just rip it up and say, no, out.
Yeah.
At least I had to do it, So I'm sitting there like vibrating with all of this. And she looks at her staff and she says, put your pencils down. And she said, this took enormous courage. She said, I can't thank you enough for doing this. You absolutely did the right thing. And now we know we can really trust you. And when they finally granted the exemption, they granted it in principle in 2006. And that's what they said to me at the time in 2006. We're granting this because we trust you and we see who you are.
Right.
We see who you are. And therefore, we're trusting this. You've brought us all the science. You've brought us all the facts. You've done everything you can do. Okay. And I would go humbly asking. I wasn't suing them. I wasn't being rude to them. I wasn't being arrogant with them. I was going humbly asking. Okay. With all the science and all the facts. When it was finally granted in 2017, I get a phone call from a senior policy manager in the house, and says, hi, he identifies himself. And he says, I have the great pleasure of telling you that your exemption is in the mail. You will be nice. Yeah. And he says, I want to remind you, I've been on your file for 17 years. It hit my desk 17 years ago, and I've been watching step by step everything. Congratulations. And so I want to say to all those people out there who think that, just because they took some substances, and here's a perfect example of projections. And thank you, Mark Davis, for your good message. All good vibrations back to you and yours. Here's the perfect example of the people who, remember I was talking about bias projection and psychological projections, the people who take substances and they have fabulous experiences. I don't question that. They may have indeed. They take it 3 times, 10 times. They now assume projection that everybody is going to have those experiences because they don't have the apprenticeship. And they go out and start serving people, encouraging people. We do not proselytize or solicit in the Santo Daime. It is against our principles. It is the exact opposite. It's like the old gurus, you got to come and sit at the gate. We don't even open the door until we figure out who you are and whether we're going to open the door, okay? And so that's how serious it is. This is the unconscious projection. I had a fabulous experience and saw whatever, and now everybody I serve it to is going to feel the same way and is going to imagine the same thing. And we should be, putting LSD in the water so everyone can have these fabulous experiences. Okay? No. That's projection. And the lack of apprenticeship, true apprenticeship, working humbly with elders. We have the great blessing of people in our membership and often in senior membership position as elders have come from long-term apprenticeship in Indigenous traditions. So it could be firekeeping, it could be pipe rituals, it could be different aspects of sweat lodges, all these beautiful Indigenous teachings, and they will say, I got to stand by the elder for 4 years, just holding his pipe, his feather, and passing and observing, and years and years and years of being an apprentice, and you will find this in Buddhist, in Zen, in Hindu, in Indigenous. You'll find this in all the old traditions, this apprenticeship, where you have to respect the chain of command, what Nesby calls it, the eldering, the mentoring, the teachers. Okay, you have to respect them and you have to be humble and learn. Okay, and ask questions. And that's all I've got to say about that.
It's an amazing story to think about the trials and tribulations, and that's what often makes or breaks something, is the willingness to continue to find the way. The obstacle is the way, is what they say sometimes, right?
Yes. Yes. I think of how many generations of women fought to get the vote.
Yep.
Equal rights. I remember going into a meeting in Brazil with the elder women of the line we were still connected to, and I'm sitting with 3 of the most senior women in that line, okay? And I'm telling them, are you aware that this year, after 26 years of the women of Brazil fighting in the courts, 26 years, they fought to have equal rights, and the law finally got changed. So no longer is the man under law the head of the family. Well, under the law, a woman could not make a decision for herself or her children. If she wanted to go back to school or change her job, or, she wasn't allowed to. The man had to make that. Now, probably in a lot of families, they didn't observe that, but it was still the law. And they were amazed. No, the law got changed. The man's not the head of the family. Very patriarchal still. And so when we think of all the years that people have fought for, we can go into story after story after story. The civil rights movement in your country, how many years, decades, centuries?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Still being fought. And so this instant enlightenment, this instant I'm a healer, this instant I'm gonna, the whole world is gonna, psychedelics is gonna heal everything. It's like, no, that's not my experience. There's some people who should not be taking them. There's many people who should not be taking them.
Yeah.
For many different reasons. Other techniques of non-ordinary states of consciousness will suit them better. By the time I came to the Santo Daime, I had already been, 30 years in transpersonal study.
Yeah.
I was, in the ashram at age 21 and with the Buddhists in the 3-week silent retreats and all of this training, and then 5 years transpersonal trainings. And only then was I ready to start drinking Daime. Only then was I ready. After decades and decades of spiritual training, transpersonal training, then I was ready to start. So maybe we have to practice lifetimes before we're ready.
Yeah.
Who knows? Who knows? Well, it's been grand.
Fabulous.
I hope that, a few times I looked at your face and it's like, oh, what? Sort of sad. You have a sad face, a thoughtful thoughtful face, an inspired.
Thank you.
I'm used to the facial expressions that you make now, and I was like, But it's a challenging topic.
It is.
Would we be serving the community if we didn't discuss it from time to time? Okay.
I prefer meaningful.
Yeah. If it is not our place to inform, educate, and encourage. I'm not condemning anybody.
Right.
I hope that I'm informing, educating, encouraging people. Please, if you feel called into working with substances, really look deep inside of yourself. Make sure you get a good ethics training. Make sure that you get, experiential work in non-ordinary states. Make sure that whoever your teachers are, that they are living the principles that they're trying to teach you. And if not, then sit down and question them. Yeah. Sit down and question them. Don't just, I don't want to get a bad mark, so I...
Yeah. I often think of the question mark as like a scythe, just cuts things away. And so the more questions you have, the more you're kind of cutting away at your reasoning.
Yeah. You're actually being in courage and dignity. And that's what you're doing.
And watch out for the people that project on you when you start asking questions.
Oh, yeah. That's so interesting. Personal favorite is the patriarchy. Right. Like, how dare I question men about men's stuff?
How dare you?
Yeah. Therefore, I must
Right.
be aggressive and a bitch and all these things we call strong women. No, no. I've been. I won't tell you who called me that, but somebody pretty well known in the Ayahuasca community
Mm.
called me the Margaret Thatcher of the Santo Daime. I don't know whether to be offended or find it hilarious. I usually find it hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the only way to see it, I think.
Yeah, hilarious. Take the good things
Yeah.
and blow off the
Yeah.
rest. Okay, it's been grand. It's always a pleasure to
Thank
spend
you.
time
You
with
too.
you. Such a great host, asks such good questions, makes such a inviting and welcoming space for your guests and your listeners. So I'm going to wish you a beautiful rest of your day. See you next month, hopefully. And I think you should post a picture of the view from your home or your backyard, especially if it's got some of those giant redwoods in it.
Mm.
Okay. You don't have to show anything that, is too personal that discloses your personal
Yeah.
location. I
Yeah.
really think you should give people a slice of your new vibration.
That's a good idea. I think I will. It's the rolling hills and the big trees and
Ooh,
just such a welcoming, playful atmosphere that is. I get goosebumps when I think about it. So I know I'm in the right spot.
I know that area because, of course, all
Yeah.
my years of training with Stan Grof was always
Yep.
north of San
Yep.
Francisco, up in Napa Valley, and
Yep. So much history here, especially
so
in the ideas we're talking about. Like I can't help but smile when I walk outside every day and just say thank you.
well. Please share a
I
small
will.
glimpse with us, and I give you a big hug and a beautiful rest.
Absolutely.
And
Right back
goodbye
at
to
you.
all our listeners. Okay, till the next time.
Okay, everybody. For those listening, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Do yourself a favor and go to the links below and check out Dr. Jessica's books. They're phenomenal. If you enjoy the conversations we have been having, I can't recommend these books enough. They are like cartography for the mind, and they have helped me in so many ways. And she is an incredible gem that's helped lots of people. And she's put it all in these books. A large part of her ideas are in these books, and you can learn a lot from them. So I would encourage everyone to go who's listening in the sound of my voice and pick up a copy. So that's all we have for today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have a beautiful day. Aloha.